Masechet Rosh Hashana, Daf Kaf Daled 24. We are talking about the witnesses that come and testify about the moon. And when they come, we ask them a whole series of questions. So we isolate the older one of the two, and we say, how exactly did you see the moon? Did you see it in front of the sun or behind the sun? In other words, did the moon come down first? Or did the sun set first? See it in the north or the south? And how high was it? And so on. And the Bet Din, they already knew what to expect because they knew their astronomy. And so they knew, for example, here's a picture of a new moon. This is from Ontario, Canada. And so you see that this would be around sunset. The sun is somewhere over here in the bottom right corner. And after it's set, just before it's still the sky is still a little bit red, you can just see the beginning of the moon. And so you see that the moon would have to come set after the sun in order for it to be seen. So if they say the other way around, then you know that they are lying. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to discuss these questions and ask, says, aren't these two questions redundant? If it's in front of, if the moon comes down first, then it would be in the north, and if it's behind, then that would necessarily be in the south. Okay, let's explain what this means. So let's assume that this picture is in the summer, and in the summer, because let me explain this first. Let's say this is the Earth, right? So in the summer, the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the sun. Let's say my microphone is the sun here, right? And so because it's tilted towards it, and so when you see it setting, it looks like it's in the northern half of the western horizon, right? It always sets in the west. It looks like it will be in the north. In the winter, we're going to be this way, where the northern hemisphere is away, tilted away from the sun, and therefore it's going to look like the sun rises in the south, then it moves towards the middle of the sky, and then it sets in the south also. Okay, so got it. In the summer, it looks like it's rising and setting in the north. In the winter, it rises and sets in the south. So therefore, let's assume that this is, I would guess, in the summer, and so the sun is setting over here to the north. And then the moon is following. It'll be a few minutes behind, and it's moving from south further north, also west as it's going down. And so therefore, if you say that the moon is behind the sun, in other words, it sets later, and then necessarily that's the same as saying it's in the south, it's further south. And the other way around, if it was in the winter, would also generally be true. So therefore, these questions are redundant. Why do you need to ask both? Okay, the truth is the Bet Din can ask redundant questions just to trick them up if they need to. But we have another answer here. No, when we say in front and in back, we're not talking about the positions that the sun has to be further down and then the moon follows. We're talking about the dark side of the moon. The dark side of the moon always has to be away from the sun. That's just obvious because it's only bright because the sun is reflecting off of it. And so if the witness would say that it's behind the sun, in other words, the dark side of the moon is facing the sun, then obviously he's lying. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Either he just doesn't remember or he's making it up. Okay, good. So that's actually two separate questions. Now, regarding this fact that the bow of the bright side of the moon always faces the sun, we have a really creative agadah here. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Pasuk in the Yov, this says, dominion and fear are with God, and he makes peace in his high places. This, by the way, is the source for our popular tefillah, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Alenu. Right? Hashem makes peace up in the heavens. In the heavens, everything follows the right direction. Things don't usually crash into each other, but actually sometimes they do. But everything is peaceful up in heaven, and so we pray that the peace in heaven God should bring down on earth, and so that people should also be peaceful. So that's the famous pasuk, and it's interpreted that the sun never sees the a blemish. The dark side of the moon is called a blemish of the moon, and it also never saw the concave side of a rainbow. Well, both of those are true. But why? There's naturalistic reasons for it, but this is an agada, because so that the moon will not be distressed. This is kind of like, if a boy has a bad pimple on one side of his face, he's going to make sure to turn the other cheek during his date, right? So that the girl doesn't get embarrassed that the girl should see his pimple, for example. So too, the sun and the moon, there's lots of agadot that talk about their competition and how come he's big and I'm small. And so therefore, to protect the pride of the moon, the sun, as far as the sun is concerned, it's totally bright because that it always sees the bright side. All right. And the bow also of the rainbow, the concave side, is always away from the sun, so that sun worshippers won't imagine as if it's a bow and arrow. So if the concave side was facing the sun, then it would look like the sun is holding a bow and could shoot an arrow at its enemies. And so therefore, it's the other way around, so that the sun worshippers couldn't make up that myth. Okay, very interesting. And now the next question we ask is Kama haya gavoa ul-ayin haya noteh. How high was the moon over the horizon, and which way did it tilt? Tana chada lisfona devarav kaimin lidroma lo amar kelum. V'atanya iparcha lidromaha devarav kaimin lisfonaha lo amar kelum. So we have two baraita that are the opposite. So how could they both be true? One baraita says if it's the moon is to the north of the sun, then he's valid. If he says to the south, then we reject the testimony. But the second baraita says if the moon is to the south, then we validate it. If he says the moon is to the north of the sun, then it's invalid. Now, how could this be? And the answer is simple. La kashya kan bimot hachama kan bimot geshamim. The braitot are talking about two different seasons. During the summer months, so then the sun will be all the way in the north, and the moon will be following it from going from south to north. So, and it's if it's in the winter, then the sun is all the way setting in the south, and the moon, which is still getting there, is going to be further north. And here's another picture to demonstrate this. This is from Austin, Texas, on March 5th, 6th, and 7th. So the one on the over here, the one on the left is the March 5th, then March 6th, March 7th. So you see March 7th, you can see, so the sun already went down below the horizon, and you can see the moon is up here. But the day before, the moon is closer, and here this would be at the same time, exactly at sunset. The moon is just above the horizon, and so you see in each case, the moon is going down and moving. So in this case, it's more to the north than the sun. So this might be in the winter time. Well, actually, it says it's March. Okay, but because of the latitude of Texas, so in this case, it's moving that way. It's to the right, which means it's to the north. Okay, so you can see how each successive night, it's a lot easier to see. And when they ask how high is it in the sky, well, that they know exactly how high it should be in the sky each of these nights, and we're going to come to that in a second. Okay, Tanur Banan. Echad omer gavoa shete mardeot, v'echad omer shelo shah. So how do you assess how high it is? Well, with a plow handle. I guess you hold up a plow handle, and how many thicknesses of a plow handle from your eyesight to holding it in front of on the horizon, and how many could you pile up to get till you get to the moon? So if one of the witnesses says, I think it's 2 plow handles high, and the other one says 3, edutan kayemet, then it's valid, because 2 or 3, maybe it's somewhere in between. If one says 3 and one says 5, edutan betela, that's too far off, and one of them must be lying. But we don't invalidate the witnesses altogether. If they separate, and let's say there's another witness that says 5, so the one of these that said 5 can join together with the other one that said 5, and then they could testify together. and then they would be accepted. If someone only sees a reflection of the moon in water, in a lantern, in the through the clouds, no good. So we do not accept it. If we saw half of the moon, we couldn't even see the whole thing. We saw half of it, and even that only a reflection, then obviously that's even worse, and we would not accept it. Okay, we're going to ask a question about that, but first we could look at these pictures here. The moon at the end of the month looks like this. At the beginning of the month, it always looks like the Hebrew letter Chaf, right? Beginning or end of the month looks like a letter C. So we asked them, which way is it? That's in the northern hemisphere. On the equator, it actually looks straight like this, which is really cool. Complicating all these matters that we're not going to get into is that the plane of the sun's orbit is about 5 degrees different from the plane of the moon's orbit. That's the blue one, and the sun is the yellow one. And so that causes a lot of complications in trying to figure out exactly the relationship between the sun and the moon on each day on each month. But that's why sometimes it's on this side and sometimes it's on that side. Okay, question on that. You just said if I see reflection, if I see the entire moon reflected in the water, it's no good. So if I only see half of it, then for sure it's not good. Why do you have to bother telling me that? No, the chidush is even if I see half of it live, I see half of it right up there in the sky, but the other half I see reflected, or I see half of it through the clouds, but half of it clear, or I see half of it in a mirror or lantern, glass, and the other half I see up in the sky. Nevertheless, it's no good. I have to see the entirety of the moon. Whatever can be seen, that sliver, I have to see the whole thing directly. Okay, tenor banan. Re'inuhu v'shub lo re'inuhu. En me'idin alav. Kol hachi chazula ve'azle. So another Baraita says, if they come and say, we saw the moon and then we didn't see it, so we don't accept their testimony. So now we ask a question on this Baraita. What? How long do they have to go on watching it? I mean, they're going to see it. They look at it for a few minutes to note and be able to answer all the questions. But let's say later they walk around, they walk away. So why do they have to keep watching it the entire time? Who cares if they didn't see it afterwards? And the answer is, the thing is that they weren't looking for it at first. They were just hanging out, doing something else. And then they happened to see it. I said, did you see the moon? Yeah, I think I saw it. And then they go and look at it intently. And so maybe they go up to the top of the mountain so they could see it better. And then when they get there with intention to analyze it, then it's not there anymore. That's what we're talking about. Then they must have seen just something else. Maybe they saw a little cloud or a little wisp and they thought it was the moon because they didn't look at it carefully. But as long as they looked at it carefully one time, then that's it. Then they can testify. They don't have to keep staring at it the whole night. All right. So that's the first Mishnah. Now, next Mishnah, once the witnesses are accepted, Rosh Betin Omer Mekudash, V'chol Hamonim v'Omenim Mekudash Mekudash. You have this whole ceremony that the chief justice says Mekudash, the moon is sanctified, and everyone in the courtroom, everybody all around, will answer twice. Yes, it is sanctified. It is sanctified, and that makes it official. Ben shenira bizmano, ben shelo nira bizmano mekadeshin oto. And according to Tanakama, we're going to see another opinion here and a couple more opinions in the Gemara. According to Tanakama, they would do this procedure no matter what, whether the moon was seen at its time. At its time means on the 30th day. In other words, the previous month was only 29 days, chesed, and then the 30th day turns into Rosh Chodesh, the first of the next month. So whether it's at that point or whether it was not seen at that time, at its time. So in other words, the previous month was 30 days, and then the 31st day, that is declared Rosh Chodesh. And that could only be one of those two, because a month is 29 and a half days, so either it's going to be 29 or 30. So whether it's the first of the two possible days or the second, they do the ceremony no matter what. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Sadok Omer im lo nir'a bizmano en mekadishin oto shekabar kiddishuhu shamayim. Rabbi Elazar disagrees, and Rabbi Sadok, there's another one. Rabbi Elazar, if it was not seen at its time, then you don't have to sanctify it, because that's it. It's already done automatically, right? In heaven, it's already sanctified. In other words, since it can be either day one or day two, so if it's day one, so we have to sanctify it so people know it's day one. If it's not day one, then it's automatically going to be day two. It can't be day three. It's only one of two possibilities. And so therefore, we don't have to do anything. We just can be passive. It wasn't day one. It will automatically be day two. We don't have to announce it. So Rabbi Sadok really does make sense. And Tanakama may be wanting to emphasize and really, push that the Bet Din should be involved no matter what in all cases, and that will bring more authority. It'll, people will go and listen to it, and it'll establish their authority over the calendar more. So even though it's not technically necessary, that could be Tanakama's reasoning. Now, Gemara says about this. Rosh Betin. How do we know what's the source that the head of the Bet Din should say this? Amar Rabbi Chia bar Gamda, Amar Rabbi Yosef ben Shaul, Amar Rabbi, Amar Chera, Vaydaber Moshe et Moadei Adonai, Mikan sherosh Bet Din omer mekudash. So Moshe told them, he declared the moon, and so Moshe was the chief rabbi of the time, and so too the chief rabbi of the chief of the court of every generation should announce it and say mikudash. How do we know the people have to answer when he says that? Because the pasuk says that you should call them, so you should call them out. Atem, and we can read the word otam as atem, that atikreu atem, you, plural. When you're listening to it, you should all call it mikudash. So that's how we know that they should answer. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak amar elehem moadai, hem yomeru moadai. Or another way to derive it, elehem, these, they are my holy days. So the hem peshat is referring to the holy days, but he says no, maybe hem is referring to the people. Ele, these holidays, hem moadai. They, the people, when they hear it, they have to say moadai. Yes, this is the time. So they say it by saying mikudash. So that's how we know they have to answer. Now, how do you know they have to answer twice? Mikudash, mikudash. Why repeat? Mikra'e kodesh, because it says the callings of the holy day. So it's in plural. Therefore, you have to call it twice. Okay, very good. And we have that doubling of a repetition of someone calling out and people answering twice regarding other things, like during Korban HaOmer, when he would cut it and everybody would answer, yes, we're cutting it. And there has a polemical undertone. And so here also may have a polemical undertone, and proving it for Pesukim that you have to do the ceremony, right, is really fantastic, because it's also getting everybody rallied around the lunar calendar, which is also a significant thing. Okay, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Sadok omerim lo nir'a bizmano en mekadeshin oto. So regarding the second opinion, Rabbi Elazar says you only should say mikudash if it's on the first of the 2 days. And now we have a next opinion that says the opposite. Tanya palaimo. Palaimo is a nice Greek name. It means someone old in years. I don't know if they call them when they're old or maybe even when they're young, to as a euphemism to say like you should live till old age. Anyway, palaimo omer bizmano en mekadeshin oto, shelo bizmano mekadeshin oto. He says the opposite. If it's on the first day, right, on the 30th day of the previous month, then don't say anything, because that's the default, right? We kind of assume it's going to be on the 30th day. But if we push it off, that's the new thing. Oh, we're pushing it another day. Then that's when you have to say something. Okay, so a little kind of counterintuitive, the opposite of what we thought before, but that's the other opinion. And now one more opinion. No, the Bet Din never has to declare it to be the new moon today. Pasuk only says that you have to sanctify the 50th year, the Yovel. So that's it. That's what you have to sanctify, but not months. And so now we have really all four possibilities, right? Tanakama said you sanctify it whether it's day 1 or day 2. The Bilazar, Rabbi Sadok says you sanctify it only if it's day 1. If it's day 2, it's by itself. Palaimo said only if it's day 2, because that's the pushing it off. Day 1 is the original, is the default. Bilazar Rabbi Shimon says you never sanctify it. Amar of Yudam al Shmuel Alachai Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Sadok. The opinions like that in the Mishnah that you only have to sanctify it the first day. The second, it goes on its own. Amar Abaye, Abaye tries to bring a proof that this is in fact the law. We're going to reject the proof. But the Braita says, Ra'uhu betin v'chol Yisrael, nechkeru adim v'lo espiku olamam mekudash ad shechashecha, hareze me'obar. We're going to see in a future Mishnah, it says that let's say the moon was really clear. It was a nice bright sky, and it was so clear, and at the betin, the judges saw it, all the Jews saw it, everybody in the whole town, and the next town over too. But still, it only saw it, just a few minutes before sunset. And then by the time the Edim came and they had to question them, and maybe there was some delay or whatever, they never got a chance to officially say Mikudash. And already that night passed, the night of the 30th passed, sunset came, and you're already into the 31st. So then what do we do? So then it is automatically, the previous month was a full month of 30 days, and we push it off, right? Even though everybody knows it was day 1, because they didn't say the word Mikudash, it goes to day 2. So what's the proof? Me'obarin Mikudash laha. You see, it says that it's going to be a full month, and they didn't sanctify it. The point is, they don't have to sanctify it because it's the second day. It's a full month, and that would follow Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Sadok. So is that a good proof? Not necessarily. By saying me'ubad, they're not saying it is 31, and you don't have to say mikudash. The point is that I would have thought, since everybody saw it so clearly, including the judges and all the people, therefore it became publicized that the first day 1, even if you don't say mikudash, it's as if you said mikudash. Everybody already knows it. And so it would not be a full month. I might have thought that. Kamash malan. That's why the word me'obad has to say that, as if you don't say the word mikudash on the first day, it goes to the second day. But maybe on the second day, then you would also go through the ceremony and say mikudash. There's no proof from that either way. All right. And now the next and last Mishnah for today. Demut Surot Levana Hayu Lo Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel was the Nasi, so he's the head of the court. And in his office, he had pictures of moons, different pictures of moons. Betabla ubakota baliyato, on a tablet and on the wall in his attic. Shebahen mar'e et hejot, and he would show the idiots. No, I don't mean that. The word hejot, it comes as a cognate of the word idiot. It means originally, no, it's not a derogatory term. It means the masses, the regular people, anyone who comes. They're not necessarily experts, and they know how to describe exactly, north this many degrees and this many hand breadths. That's difficult. So if I use pictures, then he could say, like the pictures I showed before, right? Did you see it this way or did you see it that way? And that would be a helpful tool. Okay, so this is really good. And now we're going to get into a really fascinating and quite practical discussion of, are you allowed to make pictures and sculptures of heavenly bodies? Or how about of people? Or how about of angels? So these people put these things in their homes, sometimes as decoration, or sometimes in a bet knesset, or in books. I mean, you have this all over the place. So this is a fantastic source. So here we question. Lo tasun iti, lo tasun kidmut shamashai. Was Rabban Gamliel allowed to have pictures of moons in his office? Doesn't it say, lo tasun, you cannot make with me gods of silver or of gold, and so on. All things, all celestial bodies. You cannot make lotasun iti. We're understanding the word iti to make that which is with me. Obviously, you can't make a picture of God because he has no picture. But you can't even make things that are with him, meaning other attendants, celestial bodies that attend to God's word. Don't make those either. and any of those celestial attendants. So you can't make them. So how's he allowed to have them? Okay, we're going to have a whole series of questions like this, and Abaye is going to keep answering them. Amar Abaye, lo asra Torah ela sham mashin she'efshar lasot kemotan, kedatanya lo yaseh adam bayit tabni techal, ach sadra tabnit ulam, haser keneged azara, shulchan keneged shulchan, menorah keneged menorah. Abaye said, no, this pasuk is only talking about making something that can be made. No one can make something that is actually a moon or a sun. They're way too big to make in your backyard anywhere, right? But so rather it's talking about other things that service God, and that would be anything that is like the Bet HaMikdash or anything in the Bet HaMikdash. So a person should not make a house in the same form as a sanctuary, with the same dimensions. And there's one Bet Knesset on Ocean Parkway that looks like a hechal, right? It's decorated as such, but I imagine the dimensions are not exactly the same. But you can't do that if it's exactly the same. Or an entrance hall, or a courtyard that's exactly like the courtyard on the Temple Mount, or the shulchan, the table that was there, or the menorah. So this is actually quite important halakha. You're not allowed to make a menorah with the same specs as the menorah of the Bet HaMikdash. Aval oseh shel chamisha v'shel shisha v'shel shemona. What you can do is make a candelabrum with some difference. Make only 5, 6, or 8 spokes coming out of it. V'shel shiva lo yaseh, but not 7. V'afilu shar minei matachot. Or you can also you can't make it out of gold. You also may not make it out of any metal, because even though the menorah in the Mishkan is made out of gold, it's supposed to be made out of gold. If you make it out of other metals, it's still kosher. So therefore, don't make it out of any kind of metal. On this point, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda Omer, af shel etz lo yaseh, he's even more stringent and says, don't even make it out of wood. You know why? When the Hasmoneans, when Judah the Maccabee first came into the Bet HaMikdash, and the enemies, they took the golden candelabrum, so it wasn't there anymore, and they didn't have enough money to go and build a gold one right away. So they got some wood, and at first they had a menorah made out of wood. So therefore, we learned that a menorah made out of wood is kosher. So you can't do that. Anything that would have been a kosher menorah, we're not allowed to make anywhere, not in our homes, not in our Beit Knesset, not anywhere. If you notice, if you go, you can go around to different Batei Knesset. Menorah is a common item you'll find in decorations. Sometimes on 2 sides of the hechal. I have it in my Bet Knesset. But if you notice, it always should have some difference. For example, the spokes should not line up, right? The one should be higher than the other. And so that way that wouldn't be kosher. Or some of them are elongated and, a different shape. So it should be something off about it, something different that would not make it kasher menorah. Okay, if you notice any kasher menorah in a Bet Knesset, you take a picture and send it, and maybe we'll file a complaint with them. Okay, so that's his answer. All right, so he said Rabban Gamliel, he made moons. Yeah, you're allowed to. The only thing you're not allowed to make is temple vessels, things that you can make. No one can make a moon, so that's not part of the prohibition, right? It's just a little picture of a moon. It's not a moon. Okay, so Amru lo misham re'aya, but the sages said back to Abaye, hold on, right? Abaye, they said shipudin shel barzel. Sorry, this is not Abaye. This is within this Tanaitic source. Amru lo misham re'aya. The other rabbis who said not out of metal, they told Rabbi Yosef, who said not out of wood. They said, wait, that's not a good source. When the Hasmoneans came, they didn't make it out of wood. It's true they were very poor and they didn't have anything, but they found a few spits of iron and they covered it with tin. They make a little decoration and they made a temporary menorah just out of these like weapons and that they happened to find there. Okay, this is a very interesting source. As the Chashmonim became successful later on and they could afford more, they made one out of silver and eventually they made one out of gold. So actually they never made it out of wood, even when they had nothing. So therefore they disagree regarding the wood. Okay. Now, so far Rabban Gamliel is okay because the prohibition is only making earthly things, but you're allowed to make heavenly things. But is that true? Here's another source. We're going to throw at Abaye. Even things that you cannot make them exactly, you can't reproduce them, then it should be, then is it okay? Another braita that now Abaye has to deal with is, don't make any image of my attendants, shamash. Right, shamash is like in the Beit Knesset today, the gabbai, it's called the shamash, an attendant that attend before Hashem. The way they're learning the pasuk, as I mentioned before, relates to the where the atnach is. This pasuk, you could put, if I asked you where to put the semicolon, you see the translation says, Lo tasun iti Elohe chesef, right? Don't make alongside me any gods made out of silver, comma, and also anything made out of gold, don't make for you. It is a parallelism. But the atnach is on the word iti, which means that according to the Ta'amim, the primary stop is lo tasun iti. That's a phrase in and of itself. And then the rest of it is, and also gods of silver and of gold, don't make for yourselves. So what does that mean as a phrase by itself? Lo tasun iti, don't make with me. They're reading it, don't make those who are a likeness of those who are with me, meaning my celestial attendants that are here with me, don't make any picture of them. So this is an interesting case where the ta'amim are following the midrashic understanding, and not what might be the peshat. Okay, so we have this baraita. What are you going to do with that, Abaye? This seems to include, for sure, is talking about celestial bodies. No, the only thing that would not be allowed is the shamashim. Is talking about the angels that are described in Yechezkel. These angels that have 4 faces on each side, right, of a human and a lion and an eagle or a vulture. So that's what you can't make. But any other thing, sun and the moon would be allowed. All right. So according to that, so according to Abaye, only if you only make 4 faces together, it's a problem. What if I only make a human face? I make a sculpture of a human. You're saying that's allowed? We have a braita that says you're allowed to make faces of animals, but you're not allowed to make a face of a person because people are made b'tselem Elokim. Animals are not. So you can't make a human who's b'tselem Elokim. Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Idi mipirkei Abaye shemi ali lo tasun iti lo tasun oti. And this is all a proof for it that the lecture I heard of Abaye, and he gave a different reason that you should don't make with me, and he read it not iti but oti, don't make me. So man has created an image of God, so it's prohibited to make a human being. So therefore, human being is an exception. All right. So in other words, now we're adding. Every time we ask Abaye a question, he says, "Okay, fine, that too." So at first he said only earthly things like in the temple, and then he said, "Okay, also the 4 faces." And then we said, "Yeah, what about this?" And Abaye himself said, "This is not allowed." Oh yeah, that's because we could read this in a different way. So fine, either 4 faces or just human beings. That's not allowed. But sun and the moon, that's still permitted, and Ban Gamaliel did it. Okay, but we're still not letting up. And other things are allowed. So here we have, this is a whole list of items, things that serve me, including the different types of angels, ministering angels. So what are you going to do with that? Yeah, Abaye says, look, if you notice, all the things here are talking about angels. It doesn't say specifically sun and moon. You know why? All these types of angels, Ofanim Surafim, are on the upper story, right? They're on the top story. They're very close to Hashem's throne. But the sun and the moon, they're on the lower level. And so this Baraita doesn't say anything about sun and the moon. So you see, sun and the moon are allowed. Okay, but Abaye, we're still not happy. So you're saying that on the lower level it's permitted? This pasuk is from the 10 Commandments itself. So you can't make anything for yourself, not what is above and not what is below. So nothing. Right? Anything even in the water. So lerabot chama ulbana. The Braita specifically says that comes to include the sun and the moon and the stars and the constellations. There you go. Moon says it explicitly. Mima'al lerabot malachi hasharet. So the one mimal, yeah, that also the upper level and the lower level too is prohibited. So Abaye, what are you going to do with this? He says, "Oh, kitanya hi le'ovdam." This pasuk is you're quoting from a different pasuk. This pasuk is lo taseh, and it continues says lo tishtachave lahem. Don't bow down to them. Lo ta'ovdem. So this is talking about don't serve them. That's what you're not allowed to do, but you're allowed to make them. Okay. Let's see if that works. Hold on. If you're talking about worshiping, well, you're not allowed to worship anything, even a little earthworm. If you'd say, "Oh, this earthworm is my god, and I'm going to start worshiping it," that would also be idolatry. So if you're going to worship it, then anything you worship is prohibited. And we answer, actually, you're right. We would include the earthworm too. When it says don't make and worship anything on the land, it's talking about mountains that people would worship, and seas and rivers and streams and valleys. And the word below says, yes, even the little worm. So you're right. That's included in the list. And so I stick with what I said. Basiya geredata mishare v'hatanya. So Abaye, so far you're sticking. Abaye, so far right now is saying the sun and the moon you're not allowed to worship, but you're allowed to make it. Is that true? V'hatanya lo tasun iti lo tasun kidmut shamashayim shamashim lefanai kigon chama ulvana kochavim umazalot. Finally, we have a braita that's going to attack Abaye right in the belly, right? Because he says don't make. You can means making it. Anything that is an attendant, for example, the sun and the moon and the stars and the constellations. So there you go. Now, obviously, the rabbis knew this braita all along, but they're saving it, right? They want to keep attacking Abaye with different things. And so he has to continue, right, limiting his what is permissive until actually his answer does not work at all. None of these things are allowed. Okay, so final answer. How did Ban Gamliel, how was he allowed to make moons that it's prohibited to make a picture of a moon? The answer is other people made it for him. He went to the NASA website, right? And he bought a model of the solar system. So they made it. Non-Jews made it. He just bought it and he's using it. So that's why it was allowed. He didn't actually make it. And also he's not serving it. So he's allowed to have it. Okay. And that's our answer. All right. We're still not happy with that. We have a story about Rav Yehuda that someone gave him this an item that was an image, and they told him, Shemuel told Rav Yehuda, that's his student. Shemuel told his student, Shinina, sharp one, right? He gives him a compliment, right? As a student, he says you have to blind one of its eyes. This could mean literally if it was in fact if had a face, human face on it, you could blind one of the eyes, or it could mean in general, give it some blemish, do something to disfigure it so that it won't be seen as an idol, which many people do today if they have some kind of sculpture. Now, hatam chotamo boletava umishum hashad. But it's still a question, because over there you see that they said don't have it around because people are going to suspect you of worshiping it. So you should make a blemish in it. And so how could you say that Ban Gamliel, even if someone else made it for him, nevertheless, shouldn't he be concerned that people will suspect him and he should make a blemish? I says no. Over there, in that case, that thing of Rav Yehuda, it was protruding. He had some kind of seal, right? And the image was coming out of it. And so that's why it was not allowed. But if it's flat or sunken in, then it's okay. So the point is, it's only prohibited if it's a 3D sculpture of something. But if it's either 2D or it's engraved, then it's just a lack of something, and that would be okay to keep around. Kidetanya tabat chotamo bolet asulanicha. We have a braita that says this. If you have a ring, a signet ring that you would stamp things with, and it has, it has a form on it. So if the form is projected out, then you're not allowed to wear it because that's an idol. But you are allowed to use it as a stamp. So you stamp it into clay or wax, and that would be okay because the image it makes would be then indented. On the other hand, if the seal is indented, then you're allowed to wear it because it's not 3D. But you're not allowed to use it to stamp because then when you stamp, you're making a 3D image, and that would not be allowed, assuming the image is, let's say, of a human face or something like that. Okay, so that's how we know that it can't be 3D. Hold on, do we always worry that if there is some idol around that we have to tell a person, get rid of it? We have a case where there was an idol around and there were rabbis there and they didn't get rid of it. There was the Bet Knesset known in the Har De'ah, right, it was destroyed and rebuilt. It was there. And right near it, there was a statue of the king. It sounds like it was in the Bet Knesset. I don't know. Maybe the Persian king forced them to have it there. And yet all of these sages went and prayed there. And they didn't worry about suspicion. People will suspect that they're worshiping the idol. So how come all of a sudden, how come in the case of Rav Yehuda, they did suspect him? And the answer is Rabim Shaneh. When it's a public place, so we don't worry. We're not suspicious that people are going to go in public and all together worship idols. Jews are not going to do that. So everybody knows it's there because as a decoration or because they had to put it there, they were forced to, but no one's going to suspect them. All right, but now this does not work for the Rabban Gamliel. The Rabban Gamliel Yachidhu. Rabban Gamliel had it in his office, and so that's a private office. So why don't we tell the Rabban Gamliel, even if you didn't make those forms of the moon yourself, nevertheless, you're not allowed to have them because people will come in and say, hey, what are these things on the moon doing? Are you a moon worshiper? So that's a problem. And he might have had pictures of suns too, so that he could show, the relationship between them. So how come they didn't tell him to get rid of it since he's an individual? And the answer is, well, we have three answers. Number one, because he's Nasi, people are always coming to visit in and around. So it's like a public place, even though it's his second story office. Or it was actually made out of different pieces that were put together. So he had made, or in this case, maybe he could even make it himself. He had different slides, either 2D or even 3D, but they were separable. And so as separate things, they were nothing. And then when someone would come, he put it together. But then he'd get rid of it. So that way he didn't have it. And the third one, which I think makes the most sense, is that for teaching purpose, educational purposes, he made it. And that's different because it says, Lo tilmad la'asot, don't learn about how to do idolatry. But in order to learn, so that for the purpose of education, to teach, then it is permitted. And so therefore, you see, everybody knew that he had these images here to test out the witnesses, to teach them. Look, it's supposed to be like this, now it's supposed to be like this, like that. So then it's permitted. And this is very helpful because, how could you ever have a science class when you have 3D models and pictures of the solar system and all that? And so, well, you're not allowed to have them at all. So according to this, if it's for educational purposes, it is permitted. I'll end with one last story. When in YU, they redid the library a few years ago. And so they want to have something really nice in the lobby. So they hired an artist to make a mural. And on the mural, part of it was about science. And the artist made all kinds, the planets and sun and moon and everything. very beautiful. Happens to be the lobby is right next to the Bet Midrash entrance. And the rabbi saw it and they said, "This is no good. You can't have this, right? It's not like a poster in a science lab, right? This is here for decoration. It was no good. You're not allowed to have these images." And then in the end, the artist came back and made them look, instead of looking like planets, it looked like surrealist art, just like round objects. So more abstract art, and then everybody was happy with that. And so, if you like surrealism, then you'll also like that. But this is a real case that actually happened just a few years ago. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.